Ben is here.
I think Ben is the first year.
Good afternoon. My name is Neil Marks, and this is the newsroom. We're covering live the swearing in of members of the cabinet of Dr. Irfan Ali. The ceremony is scheduled to begin very shortly. If you have been following the newsroom, you would have seen the announcements of many of the faces that will form part of the cabinet. It is definitely a smaller cabinet than the previous government, and there are a number of new faces, including persons who have been completely new to the People's Progressive Party. For example, one of its rising stars, Susan Rodriguez, is being appointed within the Ministry of Housing. She just joined the party 4 years ago. There was Sonia Pirag. She came to fame, you remember, from the Riaz Holiday case in the High Court. She only started working with the Office of the Opposition Leader last year and campaigned for them and were a member. She only became a member of the PPP last year, and then now she's been appointed as the Minister of Public Service. There are many new appointments as well. Anand Prasad, who you know is the owner of NTN, he has been appointed as Minister within the Ministry of Local Government. The substantive post there will be held by Nigel Dharamlal. So those are some of the new appointments. Colin Crowell, who served as Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Amerindian Affairs and Local Government, is being appointed as the Minister of Housing and Water. So those are the appointments. We are awaiting the entrance of the President into the conference center where the swearing-in ceremony will begin. So we will continue to cover that. As soon as the swearing-in ceremony begins, we will give you those live shots. Again, you're watching the newsroom, and this is the live swearing-in members of the cabinet of Dr. Irfan Ali. They will be appointed to serve for the next 5 years. And they are being appointed just ahead of the official or formal inauguration ceremony on Saturday, we are told. So you're looking at live pictures of some of the persons who are in the room for the swearing-in of the new cabinet of Dr. Irfan Ali. You can see in your picture there, that is Dr. Frank Anthony. He's expected to be sworn in as the Minister of Health. Next to him is Mr. Hugh Todd, who will be the new Minister of Foreign Affairs. Next to Hugh Todd is Ms. Priya Manik-Chan. She will be the Minister of Education. She's back as the Minister of Education, as is Pauline Sukai, who the camera is going now to. She is coming back as the Minister of Amerindian Affairs. Next to her is Zulfikar Mustafa. Well, you can barely make out his face there, but he served as the Chairman of Region 6, and he's been appointed as the Minister of Agriculture. Across the room, you can see Gail Teixeira interacting with some of the persons who are being sworn in. She's talking with Colin Crowell, who will be the new Minister of Housing and Water. He served in the National Assembly. He shadowed the former government in that particular responsibility. Robeson Ben, who was Commissioner of the Guyana Elections Commission, is going to hold the post of Public Security. And so that's a new appointment. Previously, under the PPP, he served as the Minister of public infrastructure. Waving to her family and friends there is the new PPP rising star Susan Rodriguez. She has been appointed the minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water. As we mentioned, Colin Crowell has that substantive portfolio. She only joined the PPP 4 years ago. She said she didn't vote for the coalition in the 2015 elections, but she wasn't opposed to the PPP being removed from office. She had had enough of the 23 years. But after she noticed what she said were the failed and broken promises of the coalition, she decided to join the PPP. Actually, one of her friends gave her an application. She started attending the meetings with the PPP Campbellville group. She eventually became its secretary, then its chairman. And then she became a candidate for the PPP. And so she is now being appointed as the minister within the Ministry of Housing. She's worked as an entrepreneur in contracting and in real estate, and her family has had a long career in entrepreneurship as well. So that's Susan Rodriguez, the fresh faces in the Irfan Ali government. Next to her is Dr. Vindhya Prasad. She's been appointed the Minister of Social Protection. We don't know if they will retain that name, but that is the portfolio that she is expected to receive this afternoon. Dr. Vindhya Prasad is known for her humanitarian work, her cultural worker, religious activities as president of the Guyana Hindu Dharmic Sabha. That's Anil Nandlal, the Attorney General. He's in his seat at the moment. You're looking at Deodat Indar. He is the former president of the Guyana Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is being appointed as the minister within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure.
We apologize for the late start. May I ask the law enforcement who are taking the oath of office this afternoon, occupying their appointed seats. President, we will answer the short one.
That's again Deodat Indar. He's been appointed a minister within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. Next to him is the man who will hold the substantive post of Minister of Public Infrastructure. That's Juan Edgil. He previously served under the PPP as minister within the Ministry of Finance. In your video now, you can see Sonia Parag. She's been an attorney at law for many years. She started working with the Office of the Opposition Leader in 2009, offering volunteer services really to persons who couldn't afford legal fees. And she is now being appointed the Minister of Public Service and will take the oath of office shortly along with the other ministers. Next to her is Kwame McCoy. We know him very well. He's been very active in the PPP. He served as the head of the press and publicity unit under the Jagdeo presidency. Kwame McCoy has many other positions before. He actually started out his career as a reporter with the Guyana Broadcasting Corporation. That's the national radio station before the National Communications Network. And right, so I'm being reminded that Kwame actually served as head of the press and publicity unit under the Donald Ramotar administration, but he's now been appointed minister within the office of the Prime Minister. We expect that he will hold the fort over the information sector. Next to him is Mr. Vikram Bharat, another young member of the PPP. He is being appointed to the substantive post of natural resources, so he'll be the Minister of Natural Resources, a pretty significant portfolio for him. Next to Mr. Bharat is Alan Prasad. He's the owner of National Television Network, that's NTN. He will hold the post of Minister within the Ministry of Local Government. Next to him is Nigel Dharamlal. Nigel previously served as chairman of the Guyana Rice Development Board. He served as chief fisheries officer, and between 2009 and 2015 he served between the ministries of local government and Amerindian Affairs as permanent secretary. In 2008, he managed the Caribbean Festival of Arts, which was held in Guyana. So that's Nigel Daramlal. He is being appointed as the Minister of Local Government. If we can swing a little bit, the person's head you're seeing there is actually Joe Hamilton. He's been appointed the Minister of Labour. You would recall that under the previous government, the Ministry of Social Protection was lumped with the Ministry of Labour. It's meant to be they're meant to be separate ministries. And so Joe Hamilton will take up the position of the Minister of Labour. And if we can switch the cameras, the person who was not in place when we started is Charles Ramsden. He has been appointed as the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Charles, you would remember, was the person who first said that he wanted to be the PPP's presidential candidate. He was reprimanded by the opposition leader then, Bara Jagdeo, who said that that wasn't the way the PPP did things. If you have an interest, there's a particular avenue through which the party handles such matters. Obviously, we know now that he wasn't chosen as the presidential candidate. Irfan Ali was. But Charles Ramsden just graduated in oil and gas management. So all of his studies really relates nothing to the portfolio, you could say, of what he's been appointed. But he's obviously very excited to serve in this new capacity that has been entrusted to him, that of Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. So that rounds up the group of ministers that will be sworn in this afternoon. A completely new face that we are seeing here today is Attorney at Law Onage Waldron. She is being appointed as the Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce. The Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance and the Colonel are blocking her. But we're going to try to get a closer image. Yes, so that's Attorney at Law Onage Waldron. She's been appointed as the Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce. So there we think we have rounded up all the members of the Irfan Ali cabinet that are being appointed this afternoon. So we are awaiting the arrival of President Irfan Ali, who will swearing the members of his cabinet, all of them that we have rounded out for you. Arriving now is the former Prime Minister, Samuel Hines. This is going to be a very brief ceremony this afternoon. All that happens really is that they take their oath of office and then they are given their instruments, the instruments of appointment. Vice President Dr. Bara Jagdeo has just arrived and will be shown to his seat. Dr. Jagdeo served as the longest president in Guyana, 2009 to 2011, when he had completed his second consecutive term as president. He has joined the Irfan Ali government as vice president. The only appointment we should tell you that hasn't been finalized is that of the Minister of Finance. No one has been identified for that post. The Prime Minister has now entered the auditorium where the swearing-in ceremony will take place. Brigadier Mark Phillips, the Prime Minister of Guyana. So President Irfan Ali will now arrive in the auditorium to carry out the official functions of swearing in the members of his cabinet. The President goes straight to his seat and the swearing-in ceremony will now begin.
Good. Your Excellency, President Mohammed Irfan Ali, Honorable Prime Minister Mark Phillips, Honorable Barbara Jagdeo, Vice President, and Honorable Samuel Hines, former President, Ministers of Government, Ministers in Waiting, Chief of Staff and Heads of Disciplined Services, members of the Diplomatic Corps, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, friends all. Good afternoon and welcome to this simple but extremely significant ceremony. This afternoon, His Excellency the President will appoint 19 deserving and qualified members of the Guyanese society to serve as ministers of government and members of his cabinet. These persons will take the oath of office in alphabetical order in accordance with the title of the respective ministries in which they will serve, commencing with the Ministry of Agriculture and concluding with the Ministry of Tourism, Industry, and Commerce. May I now invite Mr. Zulfikar Mustafa to take the oath of office as Minister of Agriculture.
I, Zulfikar Mustafa, do hereby solemnly declare that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the people of God, that I will faithfully execute the office without fear or people, after that office for the honor, uphold, and preserve the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and do so free, so help me God. Thank you.
Mrs. Pauline Rose Ann Sukai as Minister of Amerindian Affairs.
Of Minister of Amerindian Affairs. She previously served in this portfolio under the PPP government, so she is returning to that portfolio. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs covers issues related to the country's indigenous peoples in some of in the regions that they mostly live, regions 1, 7, 8, 9. So, Ms. Sukai receiving her instruments of appointment.
May I remind you that we're observing strictly the COVID-19 guidelines. Just keep your mask on and shaking hands, particularly with the President. Charles Shiva Ramson, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport.
So Charles Ramson is approaching the desk to be sworn in as Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. As Charles Ramson taking the oath as Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. Charles Ramson, a very ambitious young man, wanted to be the presidential candidate of the PPP and boldly expressed an interest. He's now taken up the position of Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. He's actually trained in law, educated in law, and recently completed a scholarship in Scotland in oil and gas management. Charles Ramson receiving his instruments of appointment. Priya Manikchan is approaching the desk to be sworn in as Minister of Education. She's returning to that portfolio, of course. It's a portfolio that she had held from 2011 to 2015. Before that, from 2006 to 2011, she had served as Minister of Human Services and Social Security. We should tell you that the reason for the lack of audio thereof is because there is no microphone at the desk, so you can't hear clearly when the ministers are taking their oath of office. This is Priya Manikchan returning as Minister of Education. Having sworn to the oath, she is now signing the document, which the president will then sign, officially appointed her as Minister of Education. Priya Manikchand receiving her instruments of office as Minister of Education. There are strict COVID-19 guidelines in place here, obviously, so everyone is wearing their masks. It gets a bit awkward sometimes. Hugh Todd, a professor at the University of Guyana School of Innovation, is being sworn in as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Hugh Todd has been active with the PPP in recent years. You may have been seeing him on television hosting various programs for the PPP. Hugh Todd taken his oath of office as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. So Hugh Todd is the Assistant Dean in the School of Entrepreneurship and Business Innovation at the University of Guyana, now taking up the role of Minister of Government, handling the portfolio of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Dr. Frank Anthony is now being sworn in as Minister of Health. It's a position that he held very early on in PPP governments, and subsequently he had served as Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. He has now taken up the post again as Minister of Health at a very critical time when the country is battling the COVID-19 pandemic. So we expect him obviously to be leading that charge. The PPP is taking a different avenue from the previous government. They are now moving towards mass testing as a way of trying to control the spread of this disease. There's going to be a lot of focus also on the borders and trying to control those who are coming over, especially Brazil, which is the imminent threat. So there's a lot of work on the hands of Dr. Frank Anthony, now being sworn in as Minister of Health. Dr. Anthony, you would recall, was one of the persons who was in the run-in for the presidency. The presidential candidate nomination of the PPP, but he eventually backed out and Irfan Ali became the candidate. Now you are seeing Robson Ben. He's been sworn in as the Minister of Public Works. Sorry, my apologies. I had said Public Works. That's incorrect. Minister Ben will serve as Minister of Public Security. My apologies. Mr. Ben previously served as the Minister of Public Works under the Donald Ramotar presidency, and then he was appointed Commissioner of the Guyana Elections Commission. So Robson Ben being sworn in there as the Minister of Home Affairs. Robson Ben receiving his instruments of appointment as Minister of Home Affairs, what you know as the Minister of Public Security. Now we're seeing the swearing in of Colin Crowell as the Minister of Housing and Water. Colin is a former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. He's 41 years old. He has been with the PPP for decades. He achieved a master's in business administration, majoring in international business from a university in Malaysia in 2007. And he has a degree in business management from the University of Guyana. He was permanent secretary at the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development from December 2011 to June 2015, permanent secretary of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs from June 2010 to October 2011, and then he went to the Ministry of Legal Affairs as its permanent secretary from 2009 to 2010. In Parliament, he actually represented the portfolios of local government and housing and water. And so he's now taken up that ministerial portfolio. Colin Crowell, the Minister of Housing and Water. Susan Rodriguez, as we've been mentioning, one of the rising stars in the PPP. She only joined the party 4 years ago. A friend actually urged her to become a member of the party, so she signed up the application form. She started attending meetings of the PPP's Camberville group. She rose to become its secretary and then the chairperson and then a candidate for the PPP in the March 2nd elections. She is an entrepreneur into contracting, also into real estate. That's her family background as well. She is from Middle Road, La Penitence in Georgetown. She has 2 children. She is excited about this new role. So this is Susan Rodriguez, the minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water. Susan Rodriguez, the Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water, receiving her instruments of appointment. Next up to take the oath of office is Dr. Vindhya Prasad. Dr. Vindhya Prasad has been appointed Minister of Human Services and Social Security. Dr. Prasad has been serving in the National Assembly. She shadowed these portfolios while the PPP was in opposition from 2015 to 2019 when the Parliament was dissolved. Dr. Prasad is well known. She's president of the Ghana Hindu Dharmic Sabha, and she has been carrying out various humanitarian and charitable work in addition to her religious responsibilities. She's also been running a volunteer clinic, especially during this COVID-19. She spearheaded a massive campaign to distribute thousands of masks in various communities at the very onset of the pandemic here in Guyana. So she got groups together in various communities and they contributed the materials and so on and made thousands of masks, which they also distributed. So Dr. Prasad is well known for that kind of work, and so she takes up the ministerial portfolio today as Minister of Human Services and Social Security. Joe Hamilton, a former member of the PNC, he switched over to the PPP many years ago, has been very vocal about the way the PNC has performed and very supportive, obviously, of the work of the PPP. Now he's been sworn in as the Minister of Labour. We expect it will be a separate ministry. Previously, the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security was twinned with the Ministry of Labour. But this seems to be a completely separate ministry and portfolio. It's not a junior minister under the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security. So Joe Hamilton taking up the portfolio of Minister of Labour. He's signing there the instruments under which he is being appointed in this portfolio. So far we've seen a very mixed cabinet, a very young cabinet for this Irfan Ali presidency, this government. Nigel Dharamlal approaches to take the oath of Minister of Local Government. Dharamlal held several positions under successive PPP governments. He served as Permanent Secretary interchangeably at the Ministries of Local Government and Amerindian Affairs between 2009 and 2015. Before that, he served as Chief Fisheries Officer and head of the Caribbean Festival of Arts in 2008. He also served as the Marketing Manager and Chairman of the Ghana Rice Development Board. Nigel is 46 years old. He's from West Coast, Berbice. He has one son. Nigel Dharamlal there being sworn in as the Minister of Local Government. The Vice President sharing some joke that we're not able to catch on to. Nigel Dharamlal receiving his instruments of appointment as Minister of Local Government. He will have another minister to assist him in that portfolio, and that's Anand Prasad. You know him as the owner of National Television Network, NTN, Channel 69. He's taken up the post of minister within the Ministry of Local Government. Anand has been very active with the PPP of recent. He's supporting them in various areas. Of course, obviously promoting the work of the PPP on his station. NTN, they have NTN TV and radio. He is receiving the appointment as Minister within the Ministry of Local Government. Anand Prasad taking the oath as Minister within the Ministry of Local Government.
Vikram Ota Bharat, Minister of Natural Resources.
Next to be appointed is Vikram Bharat. He is approaching to take the oath of office. Vikram Bharat is being appointed the Minister of Natural Resources. He's 40 years old. He's married with two children, two teens, one 16, the other 15. Barrett is from Berbice, attended New Amsterdam Multilateral School. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of Guyana. He once worked as technical officer at the Ministry of Local Government and Ministry of Health and as a project manager with the United Nations Development Programme. Bikram Barrett was also the chairman of the Grove Diamond Neighborhood Democratic Council on the east bank of Demerara. He takes up the substantive portfolio of Minister of Natural Resources.
Kwame Warren McCoy, Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister.
Next being sworn in is Kwame McCoy. Of course, he's no stranger to you. You've seen him on television umpteen times. Been a very vocal advocate of the People's Progressive Party. Kwame has held several positions in the government. He started off as a reporter actually at Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, which has now been merged as the radio arm of the National Communications Network. He served at the Ministry of Information and later at the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation in Public Affairs. So he's been sworn in as a minister within the within the office of the Prime Minister, rather, and so we expect him to take up the portfolio managing the information sector. He is currently finalizing his master's in political marketing, Kwame McCoy. He has a son, 21 years old. Kwame McCoy, the minister within the office of the Prime Minister. Kwame is 44 years old. Next up is Sonia Parag. She's also brand new on the political scene, you could say. Sonia is an attorney at law. She's from Anna Regina on the Essequibo coast. She lived there until she was 13 years old. When she gained Queen's College at what is now the National Grid 6 assessment, but there was nowhere to stay in Georgetown, and so she eventually ended up spending her secondary school years at President's College. After that, she became an attorney at law. Last year, she started volunteering with the Office of the Opposition Leader, offering legal services, and then was asked to be a candidate for the PPP, and she accepted, campaigned with them, and here she is, being sworn in as the Minister of Public Service. So a significantly new cabinet compared to the last PPP government. If I can do a count, there are just a handful really of ministers who once served in the 2011 to 2015 cabinet of the PPP. Juan Anthony Edgell, Bishop Edgell, as he likes to say, or he is known as in his church. He has been appointed as the Minister of Public Works, what you may have become accustomed to as the Ministry of Public Infrastructure. Juan Edgell previously served as Minister within the Ministry of Finance under the Donald Ramotar government from 2011 to 2015. Now he's been appointed as the Minister of Public Works. Juan Edgell has just taken the oath as Minister of Public Works. Once the signing is done, they collect their instruments of appointment, and that's what is going to happen right now for Juan Edgell, the Minister of Public Works. The next appointment is Juan Edgell's deputy, Deodat Indar. Deodat Indar will serve as the minister within the Ministry of Public Works. He was a former president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry, worked as an accountant in finance management at Sterling Products Limited. Deodat Indar now takes up the post of minister within the Ministry of Public Works through Public Infrastructure, as you may have known it. So that's Deodat Indar taking the oath as minister within the Ministry of Public Works. He will be assisting Juan Edgell in that ministry. It's a particularly large ministry. It has more or less always had two ministers handling the responsibilities there. Deodat Indar, the minister within the Ministry of Public Works.
Only Waldron, Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce.
Oh, this one is a complete shocker to everyone. Onij Waldron is completely unknown in the political scene. She's an attorney at law. We understand she's taken up the oath as Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce. Onij Waldron. Onij Waldron, an attorney at law. She was one of the persons who was nominated for chair of the Elections Commission by then opposition leader Bharat Jagdeo. She's a former telecoms attorney. Big cheers for her there. So that completes the cabinet of
ministers to add to the four that were previously
President
sworn in.
Irfaan Ali.
It is now my pleasure to invite His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfaan Ali, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, to offer remarks.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, Vice President, members of the diplomatic community, our Army Chief, Commissioner of Police, Fire Chief, Director of Prisons, new ministers, members of the media, families, friends, and fellow Guyanese. Today, we have seen a very important event, one in which we have sworn in ministers to function in various ministries who will be responsible for the execution of the programs of our government. These ministers will be held accountable not only by the executive, the parliament, but more importantly, by the people of this country. I expect that this team will be results oriented, that this team will work in an efficient and transparent manner. The multifaceted nature of the skill sets that comprise the team is what I believe Guyana requires in ensuring we fulfill the aspirations of all the people of this country. I say to the families of the ministers, sometimes we forget the families. You would have to provide a supportive role. And there will be sacrifices that are required because this job is not an 8 to 4 job. But I am sure that we are all committed to this task in giving our bit in the interests of our country and for the betterment of the Guyanese people. We move swiftly to the appointment of these ministers because there is a lot of work to be done. You would have noticed that we have realigned functions of government to remove duplicity, to make it easier to conduct business with government, to reduce bureaucracy, to improve efficiency, and to ensure that we operate in a cost-effective, productive, and results-oriented manner. That is the focus. The team also provides newness, youthful energy, experience, freshness, and of course, skill set that are of immediate importance as we tackle important issues of constitutional reform, electoral reform, and other aspects of governance, including reform of the security sector, managing of natural resources, managing of the agricultural sector, and reaching out to every segment of the Guyanese population. That is why you would see that we have private sector experience coming into the government, legal experience, experience in working at various agencies in government, medical experience, educators. It is a multifaceted fusion of experience and skill set that we brought together. And of course, there will be many other important appointments that will be announced shortly, but we have to move swiftly. That is why we had to get this initial phase completed as we work on an inclusive and broadened form of governance that will support the executive, that will be part of the policy framework, formulation, and implementation at the level of the executive. So we'll see many other appointments shortly in various areas of government that will fuse different corners of our society together, different interests of our society together as we work on bringing our country and giving the people of our country the best possible outcome. So I don't want to be too long, but I want to say to you, congratulations. You have taken, like I did, an oath to the people of this country, and we expect nothing less but a fulfillment of that oath. Thank you, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Join the president for a group photograph, and we will do it on the outside, sir. Mr. Lakshman Singh will lead the way. Ministers, please follow.
So you have just witnessed the swearing in of the government of Dr. Irfan Ali, the 9th executive president of Guyana. A new cabinet, more or less, if we were to compare the previous PPP government that ran from 2011 to 2015. Some brand new faces, faces that we or you did not know from politics. The last appointment, that of the Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, Onij Waldron, certainly a massive surprise. The cabinet has been filled with young people. The oldest there perhaps being Robeson Ben, if we are not mistaken. And so this is a new cabinet, a diverse cabinet. You can see different ethnic groups in the cabinet. Like the president explained, he sought to bring in a fusion of skill set and experience to bear when he was considering who to appoint to his cabinet. It's a significantly smaller cabinet than the one we knew under the previous government. There are 19 ministers who were sworn in today. There was no Minister of Finance sworn in, so a bit of curiosity about that. We suppose we will hear a word about that portfolio a little later on. The president saying to these new ministers that he expects them to get to work. He had previously said that he wants no laziness in this government, and that is the task that he has assigned to the various ministers. They have just retreated outside for an official photograph, and after they're done with that, we hope to be able to speak with some of them. This is Dr. Ali getting the ground running and to put his government in place to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic and social fallout from that. Many persons are out of a job. The economy has taken a battering. Many businesses were closed for a significant period of time. The economy has not reopened properly. We're not sure when that will happen because they're still trying to control the borders and so on. Like I was saying earlier, the threat from Brazil is the big concern, and how to manage the influx of people from that country. In the interior locations, it's particularly palpable because, one, if someone gets sick, moving them is a problem. Getting them to the city is a problem. We understand that many of the persons who live in that Region 9 area go over to Brazil in order to collect their pension. It's about $200-300 per month, so they don't really want to use that, so they try to get across the border and come over back. So that is a big challenge at the moment, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, and this government in place would have that obviously as their priority. The president mentioning that he will make subsequent appointments, not ministerial appointments, but we expect appointment of key government agencies in a very short while. This new cabinet that was sworn in this afternoon will have a official inauguration. You know, the event that comes with pomp and ceremony on Saturday, and we will of course cover that live. Is just an event of celebration really to inaugurate the new government. So this afternoon we had the swearing in of 19 ministers of government. The only one missing is the Minister of Finance. So momentarily we will try to get we will try to have a conversation with some of the ministers of government. They are outside taking an official photograph, and so we will await their arrival so that we can get a few comments from them, just their initial thoughts on this portfolio that they have been assigned, the various portfolios that they have been assigned. That is, if I can try to run some of the names for you in case you missed it early on. Actually, I don't have my phone with the notes, but what I can remember is the Minister of Agriculture is Zulfikar Mustafa. He's a former chairman from region number 6. There was the swearing in of the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport as the young Charles Ramson, Minister of Education, Priya Manikchand. She's back in that portfolio. The Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony. We had Susan Rodriguez, the Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water. Colin Crowell will take up the official portfolio of Minister of Housing and Water. We had Dr. Vindhya Prasad as the Minister of Human Services and Social Security. Joe Hamilton, the Minister of Labour. Kwame McCoy, Minister within the Office of the Prime Minister. Vikram Bharat taking control of the Ministry of Natural Resources. Robson Ban is the Minister of Public Security. Pauline Sakai takes up the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. And we mentioned Ministry of Public Infrastructure or Public Works now. That portfolio will be handled by Juan Agil. He will have a minister within that ministry in the person of Deodat Indar. The new appointment of the Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce is Unij Waldron, an attorney at law. And so those are the appointments that were made this afternoon. I may have missed one or two. Sonia Parag, the Minister of Public Service. I'm trying to remember them in the seats that they were in. And so those are the appointments that were made this afternoon. Dr. Irfan Ali almost completing his cabinet. The only outstanding one, as we mentioned, that of the Minister of Finance. So we expect to hear a little bit later about what will happen to that portfolio. So at the moment, as we can tell that the photo opportunity is over and some of the ministers are entering the auditorium. So we will try to get a conversation going with some of them. And so we can see coming into the auditorium the Minister of Public Works, that's Juan Agil. Juan Agil is the Minister of Public Works. He will have a minister within his ministry assisting him. So we can talk now live with the Minister of Public Works, Juan Agil. Minister Agil, obviously work in government is not new to you, but this portfolio certainly is new. Could you give us your thoughts on how you expect to undertake it?
Well, while it's technically a new portfolio, the responsibility that I held before as the minister within the Ministry of Finance, where I managed the government's capital budget and took care of the public sector investment program, did bring me almost on a day-to-day contact and interaction with the ministry that I'll be now heading. If you read our manifesto, that ministry, the Ministry of Public Works, will be tasked with bringing to the people of Guyana the government's developmental agenda and the transformation projects.
Could you
We have to get on immediately to ease the burden of the people commuting from the west side to the east side by delivering the new Demerara Harbor Bridge. We have to be able to provide reliable, renewable, and cheap electricity. We have to be able to realize our full potential in converting our gas into fuel onshore for the industrialization of our country to catapult manufacturing at cheaper costs. We have to secure our sea and river defenses. We have to get busy with the Linden to Letham Road. We have to be aggressively working on the East Bank, East Coast bypass. We have to be busy working on the New Quarantine Bridge. We have to open up interior roads, ensure that our interior airstrips are all serviceable to ensure safe commuting. We have to be able to do something about ensuring safety on our roads, which is something that I take very seriously because for the year we've had too many accidents that has caused multiple lives sometimes in one accident. So road and traffic safety is something that we have to look at. We have to make our waterways safe. Our airports must be able to provide the kind of a service to ensure that Guyana is on the map, providing all the necessary amenities to facilitate regional travel. Guyana should be a hub that links Caribbean to South America, opening up new markets. So we have to be able to ensure that we facilitate that kind of a travel. And there are a whole lot of other things that we have to be working on. So those are just some of the things that we have. We have promised to look at the Del Conte Road. We have to open up farm-to-market access roads. We have to be able to open up new areas to facilitate plantation agriculture. So our ministry will not be working in isolation. Our cabinet should be a team. I have a role to play, but the role I play is not as important as the entire team. I'm just a part of that team, and I'll be working with my colleagues to ensure that we make life for the Guyanese people enjoyable.
Thank you very much. Juan Edgell, the Minister of Public Works, speaking to us there on just what are some of the initiatives that he plans to pursue with this new portfolio. Now we can talk to Dr. Vindhya Prasad. She's been appointed the Minister of Human Services and Social Security. I got the portfolio right?
You did.
Great. So, Dr. Prasad, you have been shadowing this portfolio in the National Assembly.
Yes.
Could you give us a sense of what sort of issues you think are urgent at this time?
First of all, I would like to thank the People's Progressive Party Civic for reposing their confidence in me to shoulder the mantle of human services, which is crucial in our country because it's very people-centered. And within the people, there are many vulnerable groups. And as you can remember, on the floors in the National Assembly, I tabled one motion and I spoke on several dealing with a lot of those issues. And I believe that if we look at the various groupings, there must be a targeted approach to the things that have become bugbears in this particular sector for many Guyanese. Pensions for the elderly, not only how much they get, but how it is delivered to them to ensure that they do not have to endure the harsh conditions we've been seeing in the last few years. Also looking at the NIS situation, because that affects so many Guyanese. Children in particular, that's a passion of mine, and looking at the issue of abuse and functioning of all the agencies dealing with children, ensuring that they're adequately serviced in terms of human resource and resources so that we can have more widespread services, as well as ensuring that children are safer so that we can curb and limit the spread of child abuse. Women are also on top of the agenda because women are vital to any country and in the world. And there has always been this issue of gender equity and equality. So that will occupy center stage as well, ensuring too that women, aside from the burning issue of domestic violence, which will be dealt with, women are adequately looked after in terms of occupation, training, ensuring that they're given a space and a place, a voice. And also we can have more women equipped to not only have skills, but to utilize them, to be compensated, to be in the working world, and to enjoy equal opportunities. And so it's a level playing field for women. Trafficking in persons, another major area that needs to be dealt with. The thing about the People's Progressive Party Civic, they have piloted in their years of office a number of important legislations. So to look at the legislations, revamp them if they need to be tweak them so they're current, they're active, and also look at various treaties that we have signed on to ensure that whatever we do would be in alignment with those things. There are also the SDGs. So those will also guide what the ministry does. So there are a number of critical areas, Neil, and I think first it is for me to get more familiar on the inside. This is my first time as a minister, so it will take hopefully not too long for me to get equipped with the necessary information to assess where we are and to be able to very shortly put things in place, because I'd like to see a level in the ministry where people come first and people's welfare would be paramount in whatever I do. I'm also very, very interested in the alleviation of poverty. So in whatever way the ministry can play a critical role in that area, I'll be happy to be a part of guiding that as well, because we work with those who are differently challenged, those who need public assistance, and so those are some of the areas. It's a very extensive ministry and it has lots of areas as like juveniles. We've had recent legislation, should we enact it, how quickly, and those kinds of things. But I want to assure those of you who are listening to me, whatever I do will always be in the best interests of people. I'm also an avid believer of transparency and accountability. So whatever is done there will be done in that vein. And I believe, too, that there's a team that has been put together. So I'd like to wish all my colleagues the very best success. It is a massive task. It is one that hopefully will not leave us exhausted, but I think we are brimming with the enthusiasm, the energy, and the motivation is to take Guyana forward, an inclusive movement forward where all Guyanese are central to the theme of progress, prosperity, and bliss. And if we can work together for the interest and the betterment of our country, understanding that there is a space for everyone, everyone's voice is important in this discussion, and that we can have all those who are interested in working with us bring their skills to the table, then I think Guyana has a brilliant future to look forward to. I'd like to thank the Guyanese people for the confidence in our party, and I know without question they will support us as we move forward, take the country beyond expectations and make Guyana what it has always had the potential to be. So thank you to all my Guyanese brothers and sisters, and I also thank them for their patience over the long months of difficulties that we endured.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil.
Dr. Vindhya Prasad, the Minister of Human Services and Social Security. We can now talk with Suzanne Rodriguez. She is the Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water. Congratulations, Ms. Rodriguez. We've been saying that you're a rising star. It's just 4 years that you came into the PPP, and here now you're Minister.
Yes.
Just tell us how that feels first.
Well, I'm very pleased that as a young person without a political background or without connections or family members in the right places, that I can step out of my comfort zone and into a political party that welcomed me with open arms, and that I made an honest contribution, that I worked hard, that I gave my ideas and they were accepted, my efforts were respected, and of course you can see that it was rewarded. And this is very encouraging, not only for the young people within our party and within government, but young people in Guyana generally, that they can see that, there is potential out there, and as long as you work hard and you're committed, that you can become anything you want.
Great. Of course, you've been in the private sector your whole life. You're now in government. I know it's been a very short time, but have you had time to think about what are some priority areas you'd like to dive into?
Yes, well, there was no indication before that I would be given this portfolio. I do have a construction background and real estate. And so, when I met with the president yesterday, he said, I'm giving you this because I know you're a hard worker. And he said, we have to be results oriented, which is what he said today. And what we've been saying throughout the campaign, that we have to deliver. We don't have a choice. I mean, it's very difficult now with the economy that we've inherited, but we're not going to make excuses. We're going to put our shoulders to the wheel, and we're going to ensure that we deliver for the people of Guyana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Suzanne Rodriguez, the Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water, talking to us there. Of course, we'll hear much more from her as we go along. So now we can talk with Pauline Sakai. She's returning as the Minister of Amerindian Affairs. Minister, can I ask you first, at this moment in the interior communities, there's the huge problem of COVID-19 and the social upheaval that has caused. Have you had time to think of how you could address that?
Well, over the last 5 months, since the COVID started, we've had a task force, which we've all been contributing towards supporting not only the hinterland, but nationally. Very recently, I've sent in some masks to North Pacaraimans because they seem to, Region 8 just had 2 cases, but we're now waiting for it to explode. Of course, we have information about what is taking place in Region 9 and elsewhere, Region 7, Region 1, and His Excellency has quickly put together a plan of action which they're quickly working on, and I believe that comprehensively we have to deal with the national COVID issue that is, like you said, is going to cause us some serious setbacks if we don't deal with it now.
And what are some of the other priority areas you're thinking of for your ministry? I mean, you've been there before. There might have been things left undone. What are you thinking of at this time?
Well, one of the major issues which, concerns Amerindians is the matter of land. We would all recall that in our government, in our previous tenure, we had been able to put together commit funds to pursuing the completion of the land project, whereby we were expected to have all the lands titled that were applied for by Indigenous people, the extension, but there's been a setback, there's been a pause on it more or less, and I intend to resume a much more robust attention to completing that project. Of course, we have the gross neglect over the last 5 years, which we'll have to work to transition into much more ease for the hinterland communities, which includes overall Amerindian villages. We've got to deal with that immediately. In the more long term, we have to examine issues like, are we going to expand on the housing project? We have to, I suppose, youths and development and youths and jobs is something that we'll have to look at. And I always believe that the empowerment of the people is going to greatly help in any national drive to bring on par those who are in a lesser economic position. And therefore, we will have to look to see how we will continue to invest in the area of entrepreneurship, whereby we've started a project where communities were provided with funding to start projects. We'll have to continue that because that provides income, it provides a source of livelihood, it promotes food security, and of course we'll deal with the tourism issue too. That's also a very positive, and the potential in that area is great. We need to continue to address that. So there are many, as you said, potential areas that we will have to continue to work in. And of course, we have to transform the lives of the people.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. The Pauline Sakai, the Minister of Amerindian Affairs, she's returning to that portfolio. Now we can talk with Minister of Education, Priya Malikchan. Ms. Malikchan, you're returning to this portfolio. I have to ask you about, I suppose the first thing that you'll try to address is the reopening of schools after what COVID-19 did. Yeah. Any thoughts initially on how you plan to address that?
Well, thank you very much for the warm congratulations. What COVID-19 is doing. So, the thing of paramount importance right now is going to be what we do when schools should have been reopened. Do we open? And if we open, how do we keep our children and our teachers and their families safe? Do we not open? And if we don't open, then how do we continue to engage our children? So the balance is going to be with their constitutional duty to be educated, a right to be educated, and our duty to keep the population safe. And it's going to be a fine. It's never going to be easy. We're going to make sure we use science and medicine and the statistics at hand and the stories around Guyana to determine what to do. Like every other country, it's not going to be an easy question to face. But I think important is that we get out information to our parents and teachers. And so that's going to be the first thing we do. And it's probably not going to be resolved within a day, because we really have to check. If you look at various countries, some countries have opened very successfully schools like Denmark and so on, and they've used the bubble method where you have no more than 12 children appropriately distanced, masked, hand washing and all that, and then and they've done very well with that. But then Israel did the same thing, moved from the bubble method 2 weeks after they opened, and their numbers went through the roof. With large numbers of children and teachers being infected and or quarantined for being suspected of being infected. Guyana, bubble method sounds really nice on paper, but could our schools accommodate that? So we have to make sure we use the science of what we know about COVID, along with our statistics here and our realities about classrooms and spacings and the availability of clean water to wash hands and all that. So those would be some of the considerations we're going to be looking at, but that is of paramount importance right now as well.
I hate to put you on the spot, but realistically, do you see September schools reopening?
Right, so it would be really precipitate for me to speak about that right now. I know as a parent, I'm extremely concerned that very concerned, and if I have that concern, I can only imagine every single other parent has that concern, and definitely our teachers must be worried. So we know that we need to answer those questions to people very early so that they know what they're doing, because we're not unaware too that when children go to schools, you have this thing where parents work and their kids are at school. If they have to stay home, then parents would need to make arrangements who are going back to work and so on. So we know it's something we need to address early, and it will be addressed early and with the best information we have to keep our population safe.
Other priority areas you can talk to us about?
Well, Neil, we have huge priority areas like curriculum reform and so on. We're teaching way too many things too early, and we're not sure if, I'm not sure if that those subjects and the content is relevant to Guyana today and what we expect Guyana to be in a few years' time, given our new realities and so on. But honestly, those things are miniature compared to the COVID and addressing that. So, because it's not only addressing COVID. Look, our children have been home for 5 months now. Grade 5 children who are presently in grade 5 would not have covered content that they need to write for the grade 6 exam next year. So this goes all the way into 2021. So it's a very wide, it has affected the education sector very widely, and it needs to be properly thought out, whatever we do.
Right. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Priya Manik-Chand, the Minister of Education, talking to us of just how she envisions tackling COVID-19 at the moment. So now we can talk with Deodat Indar. He is the minister within the Ministry of Public Works. So Mr. Indar, thank you very much for talking with us. Yes. So you're obviously from a private sector background. You've supported Irfaan Ali for this presidency. You're now a minister of government. Have you wrapped your head around what that would involve?
Well, I'm taking it day by day, but when the president asked me to serve yesterday, I said yes. He asked me to serve in this capacity. As you rightly said, my strong suit is business, finance, and so on, but I'm an operations guy too. I get things done. I have a track record of getting things done. And the president has asked me to go to this ministry, make sure that his transformational agenda on the infrastructure of the country becomes a reality. So, as you know, we campaigned a lot on the Deepwater Harbor. We campaigned a lot on the Demerara Harbor Bridge, the Del Conte Road, the bypass road, better drainage and irrigation in the country, better roads, bridges, the maritime department. So there's a cost of energy, the Amelia Fall. So there's a lot of things that we campaigned on, and the president would like to see that the skills that I possess be used for the service of the country. to evaluate the feasibility of these things quickly, get these projects out quickly, so that within the first 5 years we can able to kickstart these projects, right? So my job within the ministry is to actually do that, right? So we will further see the refinement of what we have to do, prioritizing the agenda, and make sure that we get these things out quickly, because as if you go around the country, you'll find that most of the roads, the bridges, and so some of them are not in proper state. You from the countryside, you know, we both from the countryside, you drive around, is the holes in the, you can't find the car. So we had to fix all of those things, right? So we have the normal work that the public ministry, public works ministry is going to deal with, but then on top of that is the transformational agenda of the Irfaan Ali's administration, and that is what we got to make into reality, right? Obviously, you know, those are large projects, and they will be, you know, they will have to go through a process of feasibility, and then you get financing, and then you go into it, right? So that is what we have to do. Neil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Indar.
Thank you.
Deodat Indar there, the Minister within the Ministry of Public Works. Minister Juan Edghill is the substantive minister in that portfolio. Now we can talk with Sonia Parag. She is new minister in the government. Sonia is the Minister of Public Service. You were telling me early on that you just went over to the office of the Leader of the Opposition a year ago. Then you got on the campaign trail, and now here you're a Minister of Government.
It's crazy, isn't it, in just 1 year? Yes, it's, you know what, I am excited because of the lengthy time, the 5 months that we've had waiting to get to this point, and I'm quite frankly very excited. But also it's, I feel a little bit, it's like it's incredible to believe. But here I am, and my nature is to give my all, as I've done throughout this electoral process, and that I don't plan to stop at any point in time in terms of giving my all. So I do believe that as I get into office, I will familiarize myself. The first thing, I will familiarize myself with my staff, with the status of that ministry, and then probably, not probably, but I will start to implement my policies, let them know what my goals are. I'm looking for professionalism. I'm looking to have meetings with every department so that we can, in a unified way, move forward. And hopefully, not hopefully, but the aim is to bring progress to the country in terms of the public service employees, union, training division, and all of that.
I have to ask you, you know, sometimes the public service can get very testy when it comes to dealing with government. Have you thought about how to address that situation?
Well, I've thought about it, but what I do believe is that it requires a certain amount of patience. It requires improve your arguments and not your voice. So basically, what I will say is that we sit down at the table like mature adults and find solutions to those who wish to be testy in their approach. Find solutions that will work for both sides. So I would say that it demands quite a high level of negotiation skills, which I plan to bring to that.
And the scholarship division is obviously huge, and are you thinking of challenging that, channeling that rather into sectors that this government would like to focus on?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I would like to channel it in a way that, look, it's fair, it's transparent, it's across the board, it's we're looking regionally, we're looking at ethnicity. You know, something that when you throw it out there to the public, they understand, they're aware of what is going on, they know how this process works, and they can see for themselves that this is fairly done. So that would be my aim, and however I wish to implement my policies to make that process simpler, I would do that.
Thank you very much. Sonia Parag, the Minister of the Public Service, brand new to politics, and here as a Minister of Government, she's one of the fresh and young faces in the Irfaan Ali cabinet. Now we can talk to Dr. Frank Anthony. He is the Minister of Health. Dr. Anthony, you're taking up this post at a very crucial time. That's very obvious. Can you tell us, I know earlier in this week you had some consultations trying to put a plan in place. Could you tell us how that's going?
Well, since the government took office, since the president was sworn in, one of his main priorities had been to look at the COVID situation. So we have started by looking at the various agencies that were tasked with the response under the previous administration. And as you would recall, they had different levels, the task force, they had a secretariat, they had the Ministry of Health responding on the medical issues, had the CDC doing something, you had other entities working, and what we found that it was also disjointed. And when I started asking for what are the plans, how you're doing, what you're doing, and so forth, I found different agencies had different plans, nothing was in sync, they weren't coordinated. And so that's a major problem. So one of the things that we'll have to look at is how we bring a new structure that is more responsive to the pandemic and make sure that there's participation from various ministries and sectors who want to get involved with the response to the epidemic and the country as a whole. So that's a big task, but we found that the disjointedness and the lack of coordination would have been a major factor in terms of not being able to respond effectively. Secondly is that the ministry and the health, if I can deal with the health response, you would have noticed that there are hotspots now that has emerged in 9, 8, 7. We'll have to take some very concerted action to bring those under control. But one of the challenges that we have is that the previous government did not procure adequate amounts of test kits. So as it is right now, there's a limited amount of test kits that are available, and we have already started to address that. For us to know what is going on with the epidemic, we'll have to do more widespread testing. And so we have to build the capacity for PCR testing at the national level, and we are also looking at decentralizing some of that testing into the region. And why we need to decentralize is that it takes sometimes 8 days for somebody who tested positive or who had a swab done in Region 9, for that swab to get to Georgetown, then be tested at the reference lab, and the results get back to them. So if that person is positive and you have a turnaround time of 9 days or 8 days or whatever it is, that's too long, because that person would have walked around and be in contact with a lot more people and infect them. And so we have to change that. As it is, that is totally not acceptable. So one of the things that we'll have to do is change the turnaround time. On the other things, like capacity for testing, the machine that the National Reference Lab has is dated. When the PPP was in government, on the previous occasion, we had bought that machine for HIV. So it has been repurposed to do COVID. There's nothing wrong with that. But it takes about 5 to 6 hours to run those tests. So it takes a long time. The newer machines that are available on the market can do maybe about 96 tests in an hour. So we'll have to upgrade some of the machines that we have, the facilities that we have, so that we can run more tests and faster. One of the things that we're looking at, or one of the targets that we have in mind, is for the public sector to do at least, have the capacity to do at least 300 tests per day. And we want to collaborate. We've already engaged the private sector because they have PCR machines in their hospitals and so forth, to get them to be involved in this effort. And we are hopeful that we can get the private sector to increase their capacity to about 200. So as a country, we'll have at least 500 tests per day that can be done. So that's one thing in terms of building capacity. The other thing is that, as you would know, because I know you've been following the epidemic and what has been going on and so forth, is that the disease, the stages of the disease. So while these PCRs are used as diagnostic tests, there's also a role for the antibody tests. The ministry had a position where they weren't allowing antibody tests, but in that limited role, one of the things that we are examining is to allow some of those tests to be utilized in that specific role. So that's something that we are also working on. We are looking at standardizing certain protocols and so forth. So from a medical standpoint, we have a number of things that have already, we have already started working on to change. Now, we would have seen over the last, I think, week or so that a new hospital has been launched by the previous president. Well, what we have there is an absolute disaster because we have spent $1.6 billion and we literally have a shell. You have a building, there's no equipment, no bed. That building is supposed to house 197 beds. The beds, you got different types, the regular ones, the ICU, high dependency beds. For example, in the ICU, I think they were catering for about 20 adult beds, and they had another section for about 10 pediatric beds. But one of the requirements, a basic requirement of an ICU, is to ensure that you have centralized oxygen, suction, and those types of things. Now, you don't want to wheel in a 200-pound cylinder and put it next to the bedside, because every time you do that, the risk of infection and those things goes up in a unit like this. So the ideal is to make sure that these things are constructed and put into the walls, and you have outlet that come from the wall. That wasn't done. So we have refurbished this place and forget to put in all the essential things that are required for a proper ICU. So to utilize that building, we'll probably have to go and break those walls to install these kinds of pipes and outlets and so forth. So it's a lot of money, I would imagine, to go renovate. So I have a technical team that has started to look at some of those things, what we need to fix. We have spent $1.6 billion. Not a single piece of equipment is there. If you're going to treat COVID, severe COVID patients with complications and so forth, as you know, you need ventilators, you need a whole set of things. Nothing is there. So to buy those things, we have to buy them, put them in place. We'll have to buy the consumables. And those two, I'm trying to get across. Personal protection equipment, right? You got 3 levels. Every health worker working in a health facility should at least have some form of PPE, right? So whether you're at the primary care level, you should have a mask, you should have gloves. At the next, the maximum one would be at the ICU, where you have to get face shields or goggles, gowns, proper N95 masks, shoe covers, and all that. Sadly, these things are in very short supply. I've had complaints from the doctors at the Georgetown Hospital that they can't get N95 masks. So these are things that we'll have to rectify, because we can't put the frontline workers at risk, because these are the persons who are interfacing with the patient. So that's something that we'll have to work very quickly to ensure that we have enough PPE available. Consumables, that's another area. Reagents, it's another area. Medicines, that too, we have to make sure that we have adequate supplies of medicines. So there's a number of things that we have to do. The response that the previous government had engaged in is suboptimal, and I think because of suboptimal care, maybe a lot more people got sick, and we don't know the true magnitude of the epidemic and what is happening within the country. So we really have to revamp the response. We'll need more personnel. Imagine that place was open and there's no staffing plan for it. So let's assume that you had your 197 beds. There's no staff. right? Not a single nurse, no technician, no doctors. So I don't know how you're running a hospital without any staff. So all these people now, to operationalize that hospital, we'll have to get these people, we'll have to, make sure that they are in place, properly trained, and so forth. So we have a lot to do to operationalize that hospital, and I really can't understand where 1.6 billion Ghana dollars was spent on. But I guess the auditors and those other persons would have to take a deeper look.
So you have a headache on your hand. How are you going to deal with it?
I don't consider it as a headache because one of the things that I think we suffered from in the past is that the persons who were leading the Ministry of Public Health did not have the technical know-how to manage epidemics or pandemics, and therefore I guess they were not able to offer the kind of leadership. I think with the team that I'm going to put together, that I have a very competent team and we can change this around. And I've been assured by the President that I'll be given adequate amounts of resources to make sure that we do what is necessary to protect the Guyanese people. And that's what we are going to be doing. Right now we have done some assessments, and the results of those assessments would be given to the President, and I'm hopeful that in a short while he's going to talk about them and chart a way forward by setting out a number of measures which the government would take. So I'm very optimistic, and I think, with the kinds of cooperation and teamwork that we can do, we can bring this under control. It's a difficult thing. Every country has it. But I think once we take the precautions and we do the right things, we'll be able to do this. This here is not a Ministry of Health problem alone. For us to be protected from COVID, it would mean that the entire population have to come on board. That's how serious this is. There are too many people who are walking around and believe that, COVID is no big deal, right? Younger people feel that somehow it's not going to affect me, right? And some people have that kind of attitude. We have to change that, because you would have seen in one of the recent deaths, a 34-year-old person died. And so you have people at a younger age who are dying. And therefore, we all have to take precaution. But coming back to the approach, it's not only a health response, but it has to be a total country response. And we'll have to get other sectors involved, and everybody would have to take personal responsibility, right? So I think once we're able to do that and educate people, this thing is a lot about education, because without getting people to understand why they need to do this, then they're not going to comply. But if they understand why they're doing it, I think we'll get better compliance. So I think by bringing that kind of expertise on board, we'll quickly make a difference.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anthony.
Thanks.
Dr. Frank Anthony, the Minister of Health. And so we've been talking to some of the ministers who have been appointed this afternoon. 19 ministers of government appointed to the cabinet of Dr. Irfaan Ali. The only one missing is the Minister of Finance at this point in time. There will be a formal inauguration ceremony on Saturday for the government, and we will of course bring you live coverage. So this has been coverage of the swearing in of the government of Dr. Irfaan Ali. I'm Neil Marks. This is the Newsroom.